fellow Patriots, welcome back to Patriots of the American Republic. This is our 80th episode, so let's go ahead and jump into it. So a few months back, we talked about how much today's Democratic Party has in common with like dictatorships and the current regime that has held power over there in Venezuela and has kept them captive for like over 20 years, right? We highlighted the similar tactics each party uses in order to maintain its power, such as like attempting to imprison one's political opponents, right? Thankfully, when it comes to us, that tactic failed here in the US, but sadly, that wasn't the only tactic, and that wasn't the only tactic that they use at the moment. The Democratic Party succeeded in other ways that would go against the very principle of our democratic republic, right? Let's get an update on the left's undermining of what democracy actually looks like, right? So let's take a trip down memory lane to go over and recap the Hunter Biden laptop situation. Though the media ran cover for the Democrats in many ways, such as gaslighting people on the economy, one thing has been now confirmed as a reality, and that is that the Hunter Biden laptop story is true. Now, although I can certainly, throw Joe Biden under the bus for this scandal, I'm not going to do that. Why? Because I think I understand him, what he's doing as a father. I think most fathers would try and protect their son, their child, right? Even as corrupt as it is. Am I saying I agree with it? I'm not saying that I agree with it, but I'm saying I can understand it, right? It's still corrupt. But at the very least, I can understand that motive, right? Now, just to add some context to what I'm talking about, Hunter Biden's laptop was found to actually be Hunter Biden after even Biden's DOJ investigated it. The jury found Hunter Biden guilty of the charges that he was being accused of. Numerous times, Joe Biden said that he would not interfere and he would accept the verdict of the jury. Naturally, that was a lie. And he pardoned Hunter Biden, here's a kicker, he covered any and all crimes spanning back 10 years, right, to present day. So we're going to go from the moment to when this all went down 10 years back. That's an interesting timeline. But as corrupt as that was, he helped his son evade prison for, whatever white-collar crimes he may or may not have committed. And again, I understand he was trying to protect his son like most fathers would. So again, I'm not going to crucify him for it. But the layer of corruption that I'd like to focus in on, aside from the media's complicity of hiding this story, was the 52 former intelligence officers that wrote a letter certifying that Hunter Biden laptop story was false. And it was nothing more than Russian disinformation. Let's take a look at our first video.
Well, the decision by former national security officials to warn the public that the Hunter Biden laptop story looked like Russian disinformation was possibly motivated by the timely intervention of then Biden campaign advisor, now Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. That's according to Representative Jim Jordan, chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, who released recent testimony from one of the letter's signatories, former CIA Director Michael Morrell. Now, Jordan and his colleagues contacted Blinken about this last Thursday. Quote, "We are examining that public statement signed by 51 former intelligence officials that falsely discredited a New York Post story regarding Hunter Biden's laptop as supposed Russian disinformation," Jordan said in his statement to Blinken. Quote, "As part of our oversight, we have learned that you played a role in this inception of the statement while serving as a Biden campaign advisor, and we therefore request your assistance with our oversight." Well, Blinken has some explaining to do. Recall that when the New York Post Hunter Biden laptop story was released just a few weeks before the 2020 election, Joe Biden's allies mustered all their forces to discredit it. Mainstream journalists and pundits told their viewers to be wary of the story and said the laptop was unverified, suspicious. Tech companies like Facebook and Twitter, they suppressed the New York Post story in part because they had been warned by the FBI that Russia would try to influence the election by promoting false information. A top Twitter executive, Jim Baker, a former FBI employee actually, he led the effort within the company to suppress the story on that basis. But one of the most important components of this pernicious effort to treat a true story as Russian disinformation was an open letter released in October of 2020. That letter was signed by 50 current and past intelligence officials. The signatories included John Brennan, former director of the CIA, James Clapper, former director of national intelligence, and Leon Panetta, who was defense secretary at that time. Now, the letter famously concluded that the New York Post Hunter Biden laptop story has all the classic earmarks of a Russian disinformation operation. Note that the ex-spy masters and defense ministers did try to guard against total embarrassment by using cautious phrasing. They didn't say the story was definitively Russian disinformation, just that it looked like Russian disinformation. This caution was completely abandoned by media outlets that published the letter. Politico, for instance, headlined its coverage thus: Hunter Biden's story is Russian disinfo, dozens of former intelligence officials say. Democrats, including Joe Biden himself, seized on this defense. Nothing to see here, it's Russian disinformation. Most notably, Biden played the CIA people say it's disinfo card when he debated Donald Trump. Watch this.
So don't give me the stuff about how you're this innocent baby. Joe, they're calling you a corrupt politician.
Nobody's
President Trump, I want to stay on the issue of race. We're talking about the issue.
From hell.
President Trump, we're talking about race right now, and I do want to stay on the issue of race. President Trump,
I have to respond to that.
Please,
because look,
very quickly.
There are 50 former national intelligence folks who said that what he's accusing me of is a Russian plan. They have said that this has all the five former heads of the CIA, both parties, say what he's saying is a bunch of garbage. Nobody believes it except his and his good friend Rudy Giuliani.
You mean the laptop is now another Russia hoax?
And that's exactly what.
Is this
that's
where you're
exactly
going?
what.
This is where he's going. The laptop is Russia,
Yes.
Gentlemen,
Russia.
I want to stay on the issue of race.
You have to be kidding. Here we
Mr.
go
President?
again with Russia.
Now, it's amazing how these people were quick to give a false testimony, in essence, but their reputation and put their reputation at risk over politics in order to help a political person or their political party over Trump. It's unbelievable, right? So that scandal is front and center for what we're going to talk about in today's episode, right? It's the corruption that is manifested throughout, years, decades, I don't know, and seems to be coming from, in a heightened sense, from the Democratic Party. Now, another scandal that has come out, in addition to Hunter Biden's scandal, was the questionable forgiveness that I just mentioned, right? Regarding the length of his forgiveness. Joe Biden seemed to hand out immunity, not just to Hunter Biden, which again is understandable, but he seemed to hand it out to like so many other people, like if he was Oprah Winfrey handing out, cars on her show, right? Not only did he, again, forgive his son, but he handed out presidential pardons to what I would consider swamp creatures, such as like Liz Cheney, Adam Kissinger, and suspiciously enough, Dr. Anthony Fauci. How does this work? How does a president hand out pardons to people who aren't even being investigated for something, haven't been charged for anything, and haven't gone through the judicial system? I mean, if that's not corruption, I don't know what is at this point, right? It's an absolute abuse of power, to say the least. But recent findings suggest that Biden may have had no clue, due to his condition, as to who was getting pardons outside of his son, right? Current investigations and reports are suggesting that other people were issuing out the pardons on Biden's behalf and taking in payments and bribes for them. Let's check out the second video.
In the final weeks of Joe Biden's presidency, a growing body of internal emails, now under congressional and Justice Department scrutiny, reveals a system that relied heavily on verbal orders and informal documentation for issuing presidential pardons. At the center of this improvised machinery, so-called blurbs. Emails reviewed by the New York Times show that senior White House staff frequently recorded Biden's oral decisions during closed-door meetings in short summaries drafted by aides who, in many cases, weren't even in the room. These summaries, referred to internally as blurbs, were used to justify the use of an autopen, a mechanical device that replicates a president's signature on clemency warrants affecting thousands of individuals, including political allies and members of Biden's own family. Stephanie Feldman, the White House staff secretary who managed the clemency process, reportedly required only these blurbs as written confirmation before authorizing autopen use. No audio recordings, transcripts, or physical signatures from Biden were required. In some cases, decisions affecting hundreds of convicts and several high-profile figures, including General Mark Milley and Dr. Anthony Fauci, were processed with no direct documentation from Biden himself. Critics argue the system raises serious questions about the transparency and legitimacy of executive actions carried out under Biden's name.
Blurbs are not legal instruments. They're internal notes that wouldn't hold up in any courtroom, yet they were used to process decisions with life-altering consequences.
The revelations come amid Republican-led investigations into whether Biden, then 81, was fully engaged in the duties of his office, or whether aides quietly stepped in to carry out major policy decisions on his behalf. The autopen's use on at least 25 clemency warrants has become a focal point in these inquiries. White House officials maintain that Biden made each clemency decision himself and merely delegated the physical act of signing due to the high volume of pardons. But the reliance on staff-drafted blurbs, often passed around among top aides like Chief of Staff Jeffrey Zients and Counsel Ed Siskel, has drawn comparisons to the kind of government by committee that critics say erodes accountability at the highest levels of power. Some legal scholars say this method, while technically permissible, exposes a deeper issue: the fragility of executive oversight when a president's mental acuity is in question.
This isn't about the legality of the autopen. It's about whether the president was meaningfully making these decisions, or whether his staff was running the country through a signature machine.
As congressional subpoenas mount and former Biden aides lawyer up, Blurbgate could become a central flashpoint in the debate over Biden's final days in office, and whether the American people were truly being served by the man they elected, or by a team quietly working behind the scenes.
So, although some people have pleaded the fifth, there are some that are willing to testify to the autopen scandal, thankfully. We'll have to monitor and see where this goes, but I'm floored that this is even allowed to happen, to be quite honest with you. Now, for many years, Democrats have done and said anything in order to stop Trump from winning elections. They made up bogus charges in order to legally prosecute him. They tried to bankrupt him. They tried to imprison him. They impeached him twice, and they even tried to assassinate him. But even before all of that, they began a smear campaign against him, attempting him to tie him to be a Russian asset and have like this traitorous partnership with Vladimir Putin, right? Everything, I mean, since his first election, that's all we've heard. Russia, 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 Russia. And he says it to this very day. One voice was not only loud in this accusation, but was pushing the conspiracy and accusing anyone who didn't believe him of being a Russian agent. That voice was none other than Adam Schiff, who repeatedly said he had conclusive evidence that Trump was a Russian asset. Let's take a look.
The kind of evidence that you would submit to a grand jury at the beginning of an investigation. It's not the kind of evidence you take to a trial jury when you're trying to prove something beyond a reasonable doubt. But we're at the beginning of an investigation, and given the gravity of the subject matter, I think that the evidence certainly warrants us doing a thorough investigation.
Is there some new evidence that you've learned that makes you think that it was more than just circumstantial?
We have received additional evidence and new materials have been made available to the committee.
Cohen said, though, in that open testimony, he had no direct evidence of collusion with Russia. The Senate Intel chairman also said, at this point, no evidence of collusion at this point. Do you have direct evidence of collusion with Russia?
Well, I think there is direct evidence in the emails from the Russians through their intermediary offering dirt on Hillary Clinton as part of what is described in writing as the Russian government effort to help elect Donald Trump. They offer that dirt. There is an acceptance of that offer in writing from the president's son, Don Jr., and there's overt acts in furtherance of that. That is the meeting at Trump Tower and all the lies to cover up that meeting at Trump Tower, and apparently lies that the president participated in. That, to me, is direct evidence, but there's also abundant circumstantial evidence.
But you admit it's all you have right now is a circumstantial case.
Actually, no, Chuck. I can tell you that the case is more than that, and I can't go into the particulars, but there is more than circumstantial evidence now. So, again, I think...
So you have seen direct evidence of collusion?
I don't want to go into specifics, but I will say that there is evidence that is not circumstantial and is very much worthy of investigation. So that is what we ought to do.
And there is significant evidence of collusion. There is ample evidence, and indeed there is, of collusion of people in the Trump campaign with the Russians. I think there's plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy.
So this guy was out there pushing this narrative almost day and night. I remember Tucker Carlson a couple of years ago, maybe 2017, 2018. Tucker Carlson, and I think this was the first time Adam Schiff had been on Tucker Carlson's show, but Adam Schiff accused Tucker Carlson of being a Russian tool just for asking questions. Let's just take a refresher and a reminder of what took place in that interview.
On the Intel Committee, let me just ask you one final question. Can you look right into the camera and say, I know for a fact the government of Vladimir Putin was behind the hacks of John Podesta's email?
Absolutely. The government of Vladimir Putin was behind the hacks of our institution and the dumping of information.
Of John Podesta's email.
Not only in the United States, but also in Europe.
Okay, you're not, you know what, you're dodging.
And Tucker,
no, look and say, I know they did. John Podesta's email, they hacked those.
And I think that Ronald Reagan will be rolling over his grave at your carrying water for the Kremlin.
I'm not carrying water for the Kremlin. You're a sitting member of Congress on the Intel Committee, and you can't say they hacked.
You're going to have to move your show to RT Russian television because
you know what?
This
That's
is perfect.
Just so
this is
beneath your
placed.
office because it's so dumb and you're being duplicitous. I'm asking you, did they hack Podesta's emails? And you can't say it.
Personal insults like that, Tucker.
You just said I was carrying. Oh, you said I was carrying water for Putin. That's pretty hilarious.
You know, when you essentially are an apologist for the Kremlin, that's what you're doing.
I'm going to one last time, Congressman. Look into the camera and say they hacked John Podesta's emails. We know for a fact that Putin's government did that. You can't, and you know you can't, and you're hiding behind weasel words.
I just said that the
say they hacked John Podesta's emails.
Russians. I'm not going to be specific as to
because you don't know it. That's why. All right, done. One. You don't know it, and you're alleging it without any evidence.
You're ignoring the evidence because you don't care. The fact that it helped the Republican candidate is all you need to know.
That's totally false. I just think if you're going to make a serious allegation about an actual country with an actual government, you ought to know what you're talking about, and you don't.
I think that you ought to accept.
I got to go. I'm taking cash from Putin now. I'm on RT.
Republicans on the Intelligence Committee have seen for a fact.
If you could say it, you would, and you can't. And you know that.
If you're willing to be in denial about this because it suits a Republican-elect president.
Okay, whatever. You can blather on all you want, man, but I gave you a chance to state it clearly, and you wouldn't, which tells you everything you know.
You
all right.
Or our president-elect.
Okay.
Not very much, apparently.
I appreciate that, Congressman. And now I need to take a call from Vladimir Putin, so I'm going to put you on hold for 1 second.
And this is just one strategy the left uses to try and discredit and silence any opposition to their schemes. They accuse someone of something, in this case being a Russian asset. I mean, not only did they do that to Tucker, but they also have done it to a former Democratic presidential candidate named Tulsi Gabbard. The moment Tulsi ousted Hillary Clinton during the 2020 Democratic debates, the Russian accusations began flying at her. Let's take a reminder.
Clinton on the attack after going after 2020 Democrat contender Tulsi Gabbard, suggesting that she's being used by the Russians. Constitutional attorney, former White House counsel in both Reagan and Bush 41 administrations, David Rifkin joins me now with reaction. All right, David, thank you so much for being with us this evening. I want to kind of split this into two segments, and but first I want to talk about the lunacy of this and essentially what was said. So Hillary Clinton is on this podcast, and she starts talking about the fact that the Russians have their eye on someone currently in the Democratic primary, and they're grooming her to be a third-party candidate. She is a favorite of the Russians. She is a tool of the Russian government. And, you know, and it turns out that and they make it clear that she's talking about Tulsi Gabbard.
These people have no scruples, to be honest with you. Now, due to how far the left has gone, I would imagine, you know, how her own party treated her. Tulsi announced in 2024, if I'm not mistaken, or 2023, she was leaving the Democratic Party, which we covered here on this channel, and she threw in her support for then candidate Donald J. Trump. Since winning office, President Trump has made Tulsi head of the DNI, and in her role, she has, to be quite frank, Washington swamp trembling. Just a couple of weeks ago, Tulsi released some documents, she declassified documents, indicating that Obama may have been the ringleader behind this entire Russian collusion hoax. Let's take a look.
Fox News alert, the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, releasing a bombshell report today that shows a conspiracy by a sitting president, Barack Obama, and his intel agencies to sabotage the president-elect, Donald Trump, brainwash the electorate, and undermine the legitimacy of an election.
There is irrefutable evidence that detail how President Obama and his national security team directed the creation of an intelligence community assessment that they knew was false. They knew it would promote this contrived narrative that Russia interfered in the 2016 election to help President Trump win, selling it to the American people as though it were true. It wasn't.
Gabbard got her hands on a House intel report that's been locked away in a CIA vault for almost a decade. Investigators spent over 2,000 hours looking into how the Russia hoax was born, interviewing 20 CIA and FBI officials. And it turns out that the Obama administration doctored the intelligence to make it look like Putin and Trump stole the election. A month after Trump beat Hillary, Barack Obama wasn't satisfied with his intelligence reporting and ordered his CIA director to create a new assessment of how Russia interfered with the election. This was a highly unusual move. John Brennan handpicked 5 CIA analysts to write the assessment, and they were siloed. None of them knew what the other was doing, and only one analyst was in charge of drafting this report. There was nothing routine about this, and it was a rush job to publish before Trump was sworn in. Nothing was coordinated with the other intelligence agencies either. Basically, this was home cooking for Barack Obama. There were 4 key elements from the assessment that were repeated over and over again and formed the basis of the Russia hoax and the Robert Mueller witch hunt. 1, that Vladimir Putin wanted Donald Trump to win. 2, Putin took action to help Trump win. 3, the Russians had blackmail on Trump. That was the Steele dossier. And 4, that the Russians tried colluding with the Trump campaign. None of any of this was ever true. There was no reliable intelligence to support any of these allegations. Senior CIA officials repeatedly refused to traffic in these allegations, but they were repeatedly overruled by CIA Director Brennan and FBI Director Comey, who insisted that they be pushed, even without verifiable evidence. The Obama administration cherry-picked the intelligence, lied about their sources, misquoted sources, didn't corroborate their claims, suppressed intelligence that ran counter to their narratives, and even used anonymous internet postings. Rank and file CIA admitted what they were doing violated their own tradecraft standards. There was a massive pressure campaign that came right from the top. CIA analysts say they received unusual directives from political appointees, the CIA director, and Obama himself. This is how the Russia hoax was born.
Donald Trump knows that the Russians helped him win in 2016.
Putin hated Secretary Clinton so much that the flip side of that coin was he had a clear preference for the person running against the person he hated so much.
It was Russia in a very systematic way and tried to interfere in the election and to try to advance the prospects of Donald Trump being elected.
This was such a malicious disinformation campaign perpetrated on the American people that at one point, 60% of Democrats believed the Russians hacked our voting machines to help Trump win the White House.
It's unbelievable, and yet believable, given how much the Democratic Party has changed since the poisonous snake entered the White House, that a sitting president would be involved in attempting to thwart the election process, right? Attempting to deny the will of the people on who they want to elect to lead them. I mean, if that's not treasonous, I don't know what is. But anyhow, at this juncture, it's kind of hard to determine if any arrests will be made. By this point, Tulsi Gabbard has sent criminal referrals to the DOJ. Could this eventually lead to arrest of, former President Barack Obama? Just the thought of it is causing like the left to flip out, right? They're like, oh, you're destroying democracy, right? May I remind these fools that they arrested a former president and the #1 contender for the Republican presidential nominee? They set this precedence in matter. Or they set this precedence on this matter. So I don't want to really hear that we're destroying democracy, right? Because that's what they went after Donald Trump in multiple different ways.
There should be no fuzz on this whatsoever. The Russians interfered in our election during the 2016 cycle.
Charges of election interference by Russia were explored by Congress, Special Counsel Robert Mueller, and Special Counsel John Durham. But a new report from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence assesses key intelligence was manipulated and withheld from the American people by the intelligence community, calling out former FBI Director James Comey, former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, former CIA Director John Brennan, and former President Barack Obama, and a December 9th, 2016 National Security Council meeting.
The tasks that came out of that meeting was coming from President Obama directing the intelligence community to produce an intelligence assessment that detailed not if, but how Moscow affected the outcome of the election that had already occurred, electing Donald Trump to the presidency.
Gabbard suggesting a cover-up of key information about Russia's intent and capabilities, hacking into election systems and infrastructure.
Now, there are questions if the Supreme Court's ruling on presidential immunity may save or help Obama. But I thought the immunity was regarded presidential actions on the direction of the country, not illegal activities towards a political opponent that can be seen as treasonous. I mean, the fact that this all happened prior to Trump being elected president might be a, technicality, but let's be real. He tried to thwart the will of the American people. Again, that in my eyes is treasonous. And although, let's be real, it's going to be a long shot for like Obama or Biden or Clinton, right, to be indicted. But there's a chance that maybe some of the smaller fish underneath them might be, right? People like James Comey, James Clapper, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page. These are all possibilities. But let me ask this question. Let me ask you guys this question. If, let's say, any one of those people I just finished mentioning is indicted, is that really good enough? I mean, are the little fish satisfactory? Or does it still show that we have a two-tier justice system and that these political elitists can't be touched? Now, Glenn Beck has this similar observation that I do. And he's kind of broken it down like who the big players are. Let's take a look real quick.
So I'm sitting here and I'm looking at all the names. These are the names of the conspiracy. These are the names of the people that should be at least considered, some of them for jail. I mean, there's no way to cut it. In fact, Tulsi Gabbard said this today. She says that he should be indicted and prosecuted. Not going to happen. Just not going to happen. Joe Biden, it's not going to happen. Hillary Clinton, not going to happen. But really, these two are the ones that are the kingpins. She's the one starting it and pushing it forward. When it doesn't work, he steps in and he says, mutate, and now push it forward. And then what happens? I mean, if I was doing a chalkboard of power These are your kingpins here. And they started everything. But then I think you have the ones who should actually go to jail, and we'd have a chance of putting in jail. I think definitely these two. I think this guy too, because this guy's been involved, and now he's doing all the fundraising, and then he's also doing all of the lawfare against Donald Trump. Now he is still going, so he's actually a designer. Okay, but these are the ones that you should start. I really think they're going to try to go after, but they're not going to put him in jail. They're not. He'll claim presidential privilege and everything else. But these guys, she was running Biden. He's been running things from behind the scenes. We now see with all of these documents, it's pretty easy to see or to make the case that this guy has been running everything from behind the scenes, using people like James Clapper, John Brennan, Susan Rice. All these guys, this guy's a joke. He's a big poopy pants joke. She's a joke. He probably maybe goes up here. Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, they are not jokes. They are serious. This guy probably goes up here. This guy, the federal bench, and these guys are all players. I don't know if they should go to jail, but they're all players. And then what do you have? You have the cover-up. You have the people that were pushing this the whole time. It's amazing to me. The people who have been lying to them over and over again, saying, oh, Russia, 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 and then it's proven not to be right. Those people are exposed in today's documents, and I mean, it's flaming clear in especially today's documents, exactly what happened. And these people are still listening to these people saying, it's a Trump hoax. That's what it is. It's ridiculous.
Although I want the top fish, it is a long shot, to be honest. But they tried to bankrupt President Trump with fake material, changing laws, doing whatever they could to try and hurt President Trump financially during last year's campaign. So I think the full effort to go after all of these folks should happen. And if nothing else, maybe then they lose a couple of million, in legal fees in the process, right? It's a consolation prize for sure, for the top corrupt. But that's where we're at, right? I mean, if we can't really indict them, because again, most of this is going to happen in Washington. We already know, like, Washington, D.C. is like 90%, over 90% Democrat. So for you to get a jury pool that's going to be unbiased, good luck, right? So here's what burns me about this entire situation, though. It's, in essence, it is the corruption, but it's beyond that, because it's not just corruption. It's technically treason, because these people try to prevent the will of the people, of we the people, by preventing us from democratically electing the person that we want to lead us. So remember their chants of, you're destroying democracy, or that we're the threat to democracy. Remind me again who the actual threat of democracy is here. I mean, we've had example after example after example that the Democratic Party has more in line with dictatorships than they do with, like, democratic governments. Now, I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again. I'm going to keep saying it. The illusion of democracy is not democracy. And I get it. We're constitutional republic. I get that. But if they're not even meeting the democratic aspect of things, they're sure as heck ain't meeting the republic aspect of things, right? So it is what it is. Now, Tulsi Gabbard is not the only one making criminal referrals. Just a couple of days ago, the director of CIA, John Ratcliffe, is also making some referrals from some of the folks that we just put in our prison wish list, right? Based on prior testimonies given by these very same people, they may have committed perjury. So let's take a look.
So what I think I hear you saying is there is still an opportunity for indictments, potential prosecutions, accountability from those people who may have lied under oath, like John Brennan, James Comey, and perhaps Hillary Clinton.
Well, that's why I've made the referrals that I have. DNI Gabbard has made referrals. And why we're going to continue to share the intelligence that would support the ability of our Department of Justice to make bring fair and just claims against those who have perpetrated this hoax against the American people and this stain on our country.
So now, just a few days ago, Attorney General Pam Bondi has taken these criminal referrals from Tulsi Gabbard. She's taken them seriously. And just a couple of days ago, maybe like 5 days ago, they announced that they are taking this to a grand jury. Hopefully in order to obtain indictments, of some of these traitors, in my opinion, right?
This is coming out of the Justice Department. Fox News can confirm that Attorney General Pam Bondi today signed an order directing an unnamed U.S. federal prosecutor to take evidence to a grand jury relating to an alleged conspiracy to tie then 2016 candidate Donald Trump to the country of Russia. Now, Fox News reviewed the one-page order just hours ago signed by the Attorney General. A source familiar with the probe confirms this as well, while a DOJ spokesperson declined to comment on this report of an investigation. Fox is told Attorney General Bondi is taking the referrals from Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard, quote, very seriously. The spokesperson says that Bondi believes there is, quote, clear cause for deep concern, end quote, and a need for the next step.
Look, the only way we're going to prevent this from, ever happening again is to put all these people behind bars. Otherwise, the Democrats are, they're just going to keep on doing what they've been doing to actually destroy what they claim to be protecting, right? They claim to be defenders of democracy, but they're doing things that are actually destroying it, right? Now, I have no doubt in my mind that if Democrats had absolute power, they would absolutely turn our country into North Korea. Now, I say that, and maybe I'm exaggerating, but I think something like China would be a little bit more realistic. And to be honest, I'm tired of there being a two-tier justice system. There's one for us and one for them, where they can do, just about anything and they'll get away with it. And if we sneeze incorrectly, the full extent of the law is going to be applied. That's not American. So in order for us to fix this system, we need to put those people that broke the law in a treasonous manner. We need to apply the law evenly to them in order for people to think twice about doing it tomorrow. If not, this is just going to keep on going. Let's be real. Trump's only got, 3.5 years left, right? Yeah, there might be others, but we need to fix this system now. I'm sick and tired of watching people do things and getting away with it while we common folks, right, us peasants, we can't do anything remotely close to that without obviously having some severe consequences. So guys, that's my video for today. Thank you so much for joining me. God bless you guys. God bless America. Take care, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye-bye.